I never thought my own family would steal from me. For 7 years, I saved every penny for my dream home, $87,000 carefully tucked away while I lived in a cramped apartment and drove a sensible Honda. Then one Sunday, I pulled into my parents' driveway and saw my sister Sydney posing beside a brand new Mercedes SUV. "Mom and Dad helped me get it with the family emergency fund," she announced with a smirk. "My fund, my house money, gone. They forged my signature on bank transfers and emptied my account without permission." When I confronted them, my parents defended her. "Sydney needed reliable transportation," my mother said. "You've always been so stingy with money," my father added. "Family helps family. But as a financial analyst who's cleaned up their messes, for years I know exactly how to make them pay for this betrayal. I've always been the responsible one. Since I was 16, I've been the financial backbone of my family, covering my parents' mortgage when Dad's business faltered, paying Sydney's college tuition when their savings fell short, and quietly building my own future, one carefully budgeted, dollar at a time. For 7 years, I lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, packing lunches instead of ordering takeout, driving a sensible Honda while my friends upgraded to luxury brands. Every sacrifice was worth it as my house fund grew to $87,000, enough for a substantial down payment in our competitive market. When Eliza, my realtor and best friend, called about a charming craftsman home just listed in my price range, I felt that familiar rush of responsibility-driven adrenaline. "It's perfect for you," she insisted. "But we need to move fast." I promised to transfer the down payment that afternoon. Logging into my bank account, I froze. The balance read $212.47, not $87,212.47, just $212.47. There must be a mistake, I told the bank representative, my voice steady despite my racing heart. After 30 minutes of verification questions and holds, she confirmed, "The funds were transferred last week in 3 separate transactions. I can see your signature on the authorization forms." But I hadn't signed anything. The transactions led to Metropolitan Luxury Motors. One call confirmed what I already suspected. The money had purchased a 2025 Mercedes GLS 580 SUV. I didn't need to ask who was driving it. Sunday dinner at my parents' was always a standing invitation I rarely accepted due to work. Today, I arrived unannounced, parking my 5-year-old Honda behind a gleaming white Mercedes in the driveway. Sydney was showing it off to the neighbors, her perfectly styled hair catching the sunlight as she gestured dramatically. "Isn't it gorgeous?" she squealed when she saw me. "Mom and Dad helped me get it. The family emergency fund was perfect for this. I needed something reliable for my social media brand partnerships." Inside, my parents' expressions shifted from surprise to defensiveness when I mentioned the money. "We were going to tell you," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "Sydney needed reliable transportation." "You've always been so stingy with money," my father added. "Family helps family. We knew you'd say no." "You forged my signature," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the betrayal crushing my chest. "It's just a formality," my mother waved dismissively. "You've always been so dramatic about these things." "Yeah," Sydney chimed in, twirling her new car keys. "It's not like you were using the money right now anyway. You can save up again." I looked at the 3 of them, the family I'd supported for years, and saw them clearly for the first time. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft, calculated and deliberate. I left without another word, my decision already made. The system designed to protect people like me failed spectacularly. The bank flagged the signature forgery but required a police report. The police took my statement but classified it as a family dispute when my parents insisted they had implied permission. The district attorney declined to press charges, suggesting civil court instead. My lawyer explained the reality. Without a paper trail proving the money was exclusively yours, this could drag on for years. What he didn't understand, but I knew perfectly, my family was counting on me giving up, just as I always had. Sydney's Instagram feed showed her posing with the Mercedes, captions gushing about family support and manifesting abundance. When followers asked how she afforded it, she posted, "When you're not bitter and entitled like some people, family supports your dreams." The thinly veiled reference accumulated hundreds of sympathetic comments. My parents launched their own offensive, calling relatives to explain how I was having a nervous breakdown and trying to hurt Sydney out of jealousy. Aunt Catherine called to remind me that blood is thicker than water, while Uncle Robert suggested I get help for these vindictive tendencies. I stopped answering calls. Instead, I invited Bryce, my one trusted friend who specialized in cybersecurity, to my apartment. They took everything, I explained, showing him my bank statements and the forged documents. And the police won't help? He asked, reviewing the paperwork. They said it's her word against mine, that families share resources. Bryce's expression hardened. What do you want to do? I opened my laptop to reveal meticulously organized spreadsheets. I want to document everything. Every loan I've given them. Every time I've rescued them financially. Every connection between their finances and mine. You're not just trying to get your money back, are you? Bryce asked carefully. No, I said, the clarity of my purpose bringing unexpected calm. I'm going to dismantle the entire system they've built on my back. The ambush came 3 weeks later. I was returning from work when I found them waiting outside my apartment, mother, father, and Sydney, the latter filming with her phone. This has gone far enough, my father thundered. Drop this ridiculous crusade or I'll call your boss. Tell him what an ungrateful, family-destroying person you really are. My mother's approach was softer, more insidious. After all we've sacrificed for you, how can you do this to your sister? To us? Sydney circled, phone raised. Still living in this dump while I'm living my best life. So sad. She pouted for her camera. Maybe if you weren't such a bitter person, you could afford nice things too. I remained silent, my own phone recording in my pocket. Say something, my father demanded. I have nothing to say to any of you, I replied, my voice steady. Please leave. This isn't over, my mother hissed, as they finally retreated. After they left, Bryce called. You okay? You sound strange. I'm fine, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Better than fine. I know exactly what I need to do now. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd used my financial expertise to protect my family from their own poor decisions. Now, I would use those same skills to hold them accountable. Bryce and I established a secure system, documenting every financial connection between my family members and me. What emerged was a pattern of exploitation so clear, so deliberate, that my remaining doubts evaporated. My father's business records revealed systematic tax avoidance, not clever accounting, but straightforward fraud. He'd been claiming personal expenses as business deductions for years, including Sydney's first car and her apartment furnishings. My mother had opened 3 credit accounts in my name without my knowledge, maintaining minimum payments but accumulating over $27,000 in debt. The purchases matched her clothing and jewelry style, not mine. And Sydney, perfect, entitled Sydney, had been using my social security number since college, building a credit history that sustained her influencer lifestyle while quietly undermining mine. This is identity theft, Bryce said, reviewing the evidence. Multiple federal offenses. I know, I replied. And they thought I wouldn't notice because I've always cleaned up their messes. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my boss, Garrett. He had always valued my analytical skills, but this was different. This was personal. I need to show you something, I said, placing a folder on his desk. My identity has been compromised, and it may affect my work here. His expression changed from concern to shock as he reviewed the documents. Your own family did this? I nodded. I'm addressing it through proper channels, but I wanted to be transparent. If my father contacts you with claims about my character, this is why. Garrett closed the folder. Thank you for bringing this to me. The company values integrity, and you've demonstrated exactly that. He paused. Actually, I've been meaning to discuss something with you. We're restructuring the risk assessment department, and I'd like you to consider a promotion to senior risk analyst. I accepted the promotion and the substantial raise that came with it. That afternoon, I filed formal identity theft complaints with all 3 credit bureaus, submitted evidence to the IRS's fraud division regarding my father's business, and initiated a civil lawsuit for the full amount stolen plus damages. The responses came quickly. The credit bureaus froze all accounts connected to the fraud. The IRS acknowledged receipt of my documentation and initiated an audit. The civil court accepted my case and set a hearing date. My phone lit up with furious messages that I didn't bother to read. Their weapons, guilt, manipulation, threats, had lost their power. For the first time in my life, I was fighting back with truth, and truth cuts deeper than any emotional appeal. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. My father called, his voice stripped of its usual authority. The IRS froze my business accounts. They're auditing everything. What did you do? I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. He knew. The second domino fell Thursday. My mother's employer requested an urgent meeting regarding allegations of identity theft and credit fraud connected to her work computer. The third domino fell the following Monday. Metropolitan Luxury Motors initiated repossession proceedings on Sydney's Mercedes after discovering irregularities in the financing paperwork, specifically, the forged signatures I had reported. When they couldn't reach me, by phone, they appeared at my workplace, a tactical error. Security cameras captured my father shouting threats, my mother weeping dramatically, and Sydney attempting to push past the front desk security. I watched the scene unfold from my new corner office as security escorted them out. Minutes later, my phone rang, my lawyer, confirming that the judge had granted a temporary restraining order against all 3 family members based on their confrontational behavior. That evening, Eliza called with news about a modestly elegant craftsman home that had just been reduced in price. With my promotion and the restraining order documentation, the bank approved my mortgage application within 48 hours. They're getting desperate, Bryce warned as we reviewed my security protocols. Sydney's been posting some concerning things about you. The posts were public, thinly veiled accusations about my mental state, claims that I was vindictively destroying a successful small business owner and a respected community member. What interested me wasn't the content, but the engagement, significantly lower than her previous posts, with several commenters questioning her version of events. The final attempt at intimidation came 3 days before the court date. I emerged from my apartment to find my Honda's tires slashed and bitch keyed into the driver's door. The security camera I had installed captured Sydney's distinctive white Mercedes driving away at 3:17 a.m. I sent the footage to my lawyer and the police, resulting in Sydney's arrest for property damage and violation of the restraining order. She spent 12 hours in jail before my parents posted bail, the timing ensuring she would have to come to court directly from the police station, still wearing the previous day's clothes. Everything was proceeding exactly as I had calculated. The system that had initially failed me was now working precisely as it should, each action by my family digging their hole deeper. The night before court, I stood in my empty apartment, boxes packed for my move the following week. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sydney, using a friend's phone to bypass the restraining order. Please stop this. You're destroying our family. We can work something out. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and the police, then blocked the number. There would be no negotiations, no compromise, no redemption, only consequences. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, the wooden benches polished by years of similar confrontations. My family sat on the opposite side, their lawyer between them, an expensive attorney whose confident smirk suggested he believed this would be easily dismissed. I represented myself. Not from financial necessity, but from principle. I knew this case better than anyone else could. The judge reviewed the file with a neutral expression, then invited me to present my evidence. With methodical precision, I laid out the documented history, bank records showing the unauthorized transfers, forensic signature analysis confirming forgery, credit reports revealing identity theft, and 7 years of financial records demonstrating the pattern of exploitation. In summary, Your Honor, I concluded, this was not a misunderstanding or a one-time event. This was the culmination of a systematic financial abuse that I enabled for far too long. My family's attorney attempted to paint me as vindictive, suggesting the money had been a gift that I regretted giving. This is a family matter being twisted into something criminal by someone who clearly holds long-standing grudges. The strategy backfired when the judge asked my parents directly about the signature on the transfer authorization. "We knew she'd agree eventually," my father insisted. "She's always supported Sydney's needs." "So you admit to signing her name without permission?" the judge clarified. The silence that followed said everything. The judgment was comprehensive. Full restitution of the $87,000 plus $43,000 in damages, permanent restraining orders against all three family members, and referrals to the district attorney for criminal charges related to forgery, fraud, and identity theft. Outside the courtroom, reporters had gathered, tipped off by someone about the unusual case. As cameras flashed, Sydney lunged toward me, screaming accusations. The moment was captured on multiple devices, ensuring that her carefully curated social media persona crumbled in real time. 1 month later, I hosted a small housewarming gathering in my new home. Eliza brought champagne, Bryce brought dinner, and Garrett brought news that the company wanted me to head a new division focused on identifying complex financial fraud patterns. "It seems you have unique expertise in that area," he said with a knowing smile. My father's business license had been suspended pending the criminal investigation. My mother had been terminated from her position due to the fraud connection. Sydney's car had been repossessed during an influencer convention she was hosting, the moment captured on her own live stream by thousands of viewers. The final communication came 6 months later, a letter from the prosecutor's office informing me that my parents had accepted a plea deal including financial restitution, probation, and community service. That evening, as I sat on my porch reviewing my growing investment portfolio, my phone buzzed with a notification. Sydney's primary social media account had been suspended for terms of service violations following an investigation into fraudulent partnerships. A text message followed from yet another unknown number. "Please, I have nothing left. I need help. Just a small loan to get back on my feet." I deleted it without reading further and blocked the number. The ledger was finally balanced. Not through forgiveness or reconciliation, but through the cold, impartial application of consequences to actions. Some debts I had learned can never truly be repaid. But some lessons must be learned regardless of the cost. My family had spent a lifetime teaching me that I existed to serve their needs. I had finally taught them that exploitation carries a price too steep for anyone to bear. I raised my glass to the quiet evening, toasting my hard-won freedom. The house around me wasn't just a structure of wood and stone, but a monument to a simple truth. I would never again sacrifice my future for those who saw me only as a means to their end. The account was closed. The balance at long last was clear. 1 year had passed since the court ruling, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My corner office at the firm now bore my name on the door, Director of Forensic Financial Analysis. Garrett had made good on his promise, and I had built a team specializing in complex fraud detection. The annual Fraud Prevention Conference had selected me as their keynote speaker. As I prepared my presentation, titled, "When Trust Becomes Liability: Identifying Patterns of Financial Exploitation," I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. My family's betrayal had launched my career to heights I never imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a notification from a news app. Local business owner faces federal charges in tax evasion case. The accompanying photo showed my father being escorted from his office by federal agents. The IRS investigation had expanded beyond my initial report, uncovering decades of systematic fraud. I closed the notification without emotion. This wasn't my doing anymore. This was the natural consequence of his own actions finally catching up to him. The boulder I had pushed downhill had gained its own momentum. Later that afternoon, my assistant forwarded an email that had been sent to the company's general address. The sender was my mother, her desperation evident even in the subject line. "Please, help us." The email detailed how my father was facing up to 15 years in prison, how they had lost their home to foreclosure, and how they needed financial assistance for legal fees. "We're still your family," she wrote. "Whatever. Mistakes we made, we've suffered enough." I forwarded it to our legal department with a single note. "Another violation of the restraining order. Please document and report." That evening, as I prepared for the conference, Eliza called. "Have you seen Sydney's latest post?" she asked. Without preamble. "I don't follow her," I replied, selecting a blue blazer for my presentation. "She's doing one of those public apology videos. It's trending. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up the video on my tablet, Sydney's once perfect appearance now notably subdued. Minimal makeup, plain clothing, none of the designer accessories that had once been her signature. I want to talk about accountability, she began, her voice lacking its former confidence. For years, I've presented a lifestyle that wasn't honest. I took advantage of someone who always supported me, and I participated in theft that destroyed my family. If you're watching this, I want you to know I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I closed the video, unmoved. Apologies cost nothing, and changed less. Actions had consequences, and no amount of public contrition could erase the years of exploitation or the deliberate theft of my future. The conference was a success. My presentation on identifying exploitation patterns within seemingly normal financial relationships drew particular interest from law enforcement agencies. Afterward, a detective approached me. "That example you used about the sister and the car," she said. "That wasn't hypothetical, was it?" "Every case study is based on real events," I replied carefully. She nodded. "I've seen dozens of financial exploitation cases, but rarely do victims fight back so effectively. Most are too emotionally entangled to pursue justice." "Justice isn't emotional," I said. "It's mathematical. The balance must be restored." When I returned home, a package waited on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a small jewelry box containing my grandmother's sapphire ring, along with a note. "This should have been yours. I'm sorry I pawned the rest." The ring had been promised to me since childhood, but had disappeared years ago, allegedly lost. My mother had pawned our family heirlooms, keeping only this one piece, perhaps as leverage, perhaps from guilt. I placed the ring in my safe, alongside the court documents and police reports. Not to wear, but to remind myself of what I had overcome. 2 weeks later, the final piece fell into place. My lawyer called to inform me that my parents' appeal had been denied. The judgment against them would stand, including the permanent restraining order and the financial penalties. In addition, my father would likely serve at least 5 years for tax fraud. "It's over," my lawyer said. "You won completely." But winning implied a game, and this had never been about winning. This had been about justice, about consequences, about refusing to be exploited any longer. That weekend, I invited Bryce and Eliza for dinner. As we sat on my porch watching the sunset, Eliza asked the question they had both been careful to avoid. "Do you ever miss them? Your family?" I considered the question as I swirled my wine. "I miss the family I thought I had," I finally answered. "The one I believed in while I was working extra shifts to pay their mortgage, or deferring my own education to fund Sydney's. I miss the illusion." Bryce nodded. "And now?" "Now I have clarity," I said. "And with clarity comes peace." Later, after my friends had gone, I checked my investment accounts, a habit that had become almost meditative. My net worth had surpassed $500,000, a milestone that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago when I discovered my savings account emptied. My phone chimed with a notification. Sydney had tagged me in another public post, this one announcing her new job as a cashier at a local grocery store. "Starting over with honesty," she wrote. "Some lessons cost everything to learn." I blocked the account. Her journey of redemption was her own to walk, just as her choices had been her own to make. My interest in her story had ended the moment she participated in stealing my future. The next morning, I received an email from a publishing house, interested in my story. "Your conference presentation has generated significant interest," they wrote. "We believe your experience could help others recognize and escape financial exploitation." I considered the offer. My story wasn't about revenge, though many might see it that way. It was about accountability, about the mathematical certainty that actions generate consequences, about refusing to perpetuate cycles of exploitation. I began drafting my response, already organizing the chapters in my mind. This would be the final balance sheet, the complete accounting of how one woman refused to be written off, how she reclaimed not just her money but her power, her future, and her peace. The working title came to me immediately: The Balance Due. 2 years after the court ruling, my memoir, The Balance Due: How I Reclaimed My Life from Financial Exploitation, had become a surprise bestseller. The book had struck a chord with thousands of readers who recognized their own experiences in my story. People who had been manipulated, exploited, or stolen from by those they trusted most. The publisher had arranged a national book tour, and today I stood before a packed auditorium for my hometown signing. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same city where my family had stolen my house fund and defended their actions. Now, I returned not as their victim, but as a successful author, financial crime expert, and advocate for exploitation survivors. From the stage, I could see familiar faces in the audience. Eliza sat in the front row, now my closest friend and the godmother to my newly adopted rescue dog. Beside her was Bryce, who had recently proposed after 2 years of quiet, supportive companionship. Garrett occupied an aisle seat, having flown in specifically to introduce me as the most principled financial analyst he'd ever worked with. What I didn't see were the faces of my family. The permanent restraining order remained in effect, though I doubted they would have come anyway. My father was serving his 3rd year in federal prison for tax fraud. My mother had relocated to another state, reportedly living with a distant cousin after losing the family home. Sydney had disappeared from social media entirely after her performative apology. Videos failed to resurrect her influencer career. Our speaker today? Garrett began. His introduction transformed personal tragedy into professional triumph. Her work has helped federal agencies recover over $30 million in fraud cases this year alone, and has given countless victims the courage to fight back. As I took the podium, I glanced down at my notes but decided to speak from the heart instead. Most financial exploitation goes unreported because the victims are manipulated into believing they are responsible for the perpetrator's well-being, I began. For years, I authorized loans I knew would never be repaid. I covered emergencies that were entirely preventable. I sacrificed my own goals to support people who viewed my resources as an extension of their own. The room grew quiet, faces nodding in recognition. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about money. It was about worth. We teach people how to treat us with every boundary we enforce or surrender. When my family stole my house fund for my sister's luxury car, they were following a pattern I had helped establish through years of financial codependence. I paused, letting the words sink in. Breaking that pattern wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about saying clearly, "This is mine. You cannot take it. And there will be consequences if you try." After the presentation, during the signing portion, a woman approached my table with tears in her eyes. "My husband emptied our retirement account for his gambling addiction," she whispered. "When I confronted him, he said I was selfish for not supporting him. Reading your book gave me the courage to file for divorce." I signed her copy with the phrase that had become my signature: "Your future belongs to you." As the crowd thinned, an older gentleman in an expensive suit approached. "Ms. Wallace?" he said, using my professional name rather than my family name. "I'm Alexander Reynolds, Sydney's former employer." My pen paused above the book he'd placed before me. "I don't discuss my family," I said firmly. "I understand," he nodded. "I just wanted you to know that your sister applied for a position at my company last month. When background checks revealed her history, she claimed you had fabricated everything, out of jealousy." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I recognized your name from your book. I just thought you should know that her actions continue to confirm your assessment. Some people never change." I signed his book and thanked him for coming. His information wasn't surprising, but it was validating. My judgment about my family's character had been correct from the beginning. They hadn't stolen from me because they needed help or because they misunderstood boundaries. They had stolen because they believed themselves entitled to whatever I had built. That evening, my publisher hosted a small reception at an upscale restaurant. As I mingled with journalists and financial experts who had championed my work, my phone buzzed with a notification. A local news outlet had published an article about my father's case, now being used in law schools as a textbook example of familial financial fraud. I excused myself to read it privately, curious about what new information might have emerged. The article detailed how investigators had uncovered a pattern of exploitation going back 20 years, not just against me, but against my elderly grandparents before their deaths. The reporter had attempted to contact my mother for comment, only to discover she was now facing her own charges for participating in identity theft schemes targeting former coworkers. I put my phone away, feeling nothing but quiet certainty. The dominoes I had toppled years ago continued to fall, revealing the true nature of the people who had claimed to love me while systematically exploiting everything I worked for. Later, that night, back in my hotel room, I received an email from my publisher. "Your story has been optioned for a television adaptation," it read. The producers were particularly moved by the themes of empowerment and accountability. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, gazing out at the lights of the city where I had once lived in a cramped apartment, saving every penny for a house that my family believed they had the right to take from me. Now I owned 3 properties: my primary residence, a vacation cottage by the lake, and a small apartment building I had purchased as an investment. My net worth had grown exponentially, not just from the book's success, but from the career advancement that came when I stopped draining my resources to support those who exploited me. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "I saw you on TV. I have nothing left. Please help me. Your sister." I blocked the number without responding, just as I had blocked the dozen other numbers she had used over the past 2 years. Her desperation wasn't my responsibility. Her consequences weren't my burden. The next morning, I awoke to news that my book had been selected for a prominent business school's required reading list. The Balance Due was being recognized not just as a memoir of personal triumph, but as a case study in identifying and responding to financial exploitation. As I packed for the next stop on my tour, I reflected on the journey. My family had believed they were entitled to take my house fund because I had always given in before. They expected guilt to keep me silent, manipulation to make me surrender, and family ties to prevent consequences. Instead, they learned that exploitation carries a price, that actions generate results, that some debts cannot be negotiated away with tears or manipulative apologies. I closed my suitcase, ready for the next city, the next audience, the next opportunity to share the most important lesson I had learned. Freedom begins when you refuse to be exploited by those who mistake your kindness for weakness. The balance, at last, was clear.